Hello, welcome. Today we're at the WUSA 2025-2026 debate. I'm Sean Cordillo from Imprint.
I'm Tiffany Wen.
Today we'll be interviewing Samir and Rory, and there will be a debate between for the Vice President of Student Experience. We're gonna start with our interview with Rory whenever that's available, and yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's right over there. Sweet. Okay.
Hi,
Okay.
Rory.
Hello.
Do you just want to start by introducing yourself, your full name, your program, your year, and maybe a short opening statement, including why you might be running for Vice President of Government Stakeholder Relations?
Yeah, sure thing. So, hello everyone. My name is Rory Norris. I'm in my 4B term here at the University of Waterloo, currently studying biotechnology and accounting. I, am involved with a team called Horizon, so we're running together for WUSA, and so basically, the reason that I chose to run again is, a little bit long. So at any point, if I go over time, feel free to give me one of those and I can, try and cut it back. But basically, I'd been involved with WUSA for many years now. Going back 2 years, I was the presidential, candidate. And so it's not my first time giving an interview here on stage before. And so I did that for 1 year. And, during that time, I was able to, get accomplished some pretty big things that I, had as my priorities, including making sure that the bomber space, which is, was called the Student Lounge for a period of time there, got reopened. It was a space that was closed in 2019 for various, like financial and COVID reasons. And so basically my platform back then was making sure we, got it back open so that students were able to use that space again. So the reason that I'm running again this year, and the reason that I've decided to run with Horizon is because I see some key alignments in some of our goals that we're hoping to achieve this year. One of the big ones that we're really hoping to achieve, talking about the bomber, is the expansion. This most recent new part of SLC only opened in 2020. And so we're looking, what does the next expansion of the SLC look like? That includes, the potential of expanding out the bomber space to, where the patio area is now, as well as the potential additions of 2 more floors on the top of this SLC building. It's something that I've continued to, fight for and work towards during my entire time at WUSA, including at last AGM where I brought forward a motion for a new capital fee to encourage the further expansion of the SLC. We're currently in discussions with the university to make sure that happens, and I'm wanting to make sure that we continue the work there with the team at Horizon. Besides that, we're also hoping to, work on degree tracking, making sure that we have availability for students throughout campus to make sure that they understand what courses they're needing to take for their degree, when they're offered, when they're available, ensuring that they don't, have to rely on a course advisor because, it seems to be very hit or miss at times with those, with some students, loving it and other students, running into some major challenges. Last big one is just the Pay What You Can service. It's, a pilot program that we've launched this year, wanting to make sure that we continue ongoing operational funding for that, as well as the potential consideration of what the next steps for that program looks like as well. So I guess those are sort of the big 3 things that it comes to our team Horizon. And I think that was a little bit of, an introduction to myself.
Thank you.
Would you mind elaborating on what you have in mind for, you mentioned expansions, do you mind elaborating on kind of like some of the ideas you have for like what you would like to expand?
For the Pay What You Can service or for the bomber?
Bomber.
Sure thing. So the bomber expansion is something that we've been, or at least I've been, very interested in for the past couple of years now. So when it comes to the expansion, at least what's currently in the works and what's publicly available, is that we're looking at an expansion sort of further out towards where the patio is. So if you ever walk by that side of the SLC, you'll notice that there's like a wooden, fence that sort of outlines the area there. So most likely the building will be expanded out in that direction, as well as adding an additional floor to the bomber as well to make it sort of like a 2-floor lounge space. One of the floors will be, very similar to what it is now, like a flexible space that'll allow for students to study during the day, but then also be able to be booked out by clubs and other student groups on campus during the nights or throughout, different times to ensure that there is that, space for, clubs and societies to be able to do that. And then the other space will be, a little bit expansion of what the current offerings are in terms of the restaurant there, Smash Bites, and then also, ensuring that there is, a general upgrade of the space with, more plugs and stuff like that, because that is, looking at the space now, some of the major, issues that I've been hearing from students. Besides that, there's also the look of like what does 2 more floors on the SOC look like. When the original SOC renovation was done for this expansion, that was something that they built into the design process, was making sure that the support structures would be able to take an additional 2 floors. And so the additional 4th and 5th floor would look a little bit more, again, bookable student space, bookable study space, but then also looking at potentially like what would like venue space look like for like larger conferences and things like that as well.
Great. And you also mentioned improving how students understand their courses and their course plans. What are some ideas that you have for improving the students' ability to actually know what courses they have to take and if they are able to take it?
Yeah, sure thing. So it's one of those pieces where it can vary quite a bit, you know, depending on what faculty you're in, depending on what program you're in. And so generally speaking, the course degree tracking that we're hoping to work towards is something that would allow students to basically from the onset know exactly what courses that they're needing to take, to know when they're offered, and to make sure that they can basically input it all into their, you know, sequence and schedule without having to, you know, do the behind the scenes, going through dozens of different websites and different tools, and you know, having to basically make a massive Excel spreadsheet of, you know, when courses are offered and what are co and anti-recs and how they impact each other and all these different pieces. I think a lot of students used to rely on like UW Flow for that service back, you know, for the past couple of years. But I think UW Flow has run into some challenges recently with the change of the university's information that they release publicly when it comes to some of their course offerings and things like that. And as well, just the fact that like it doesn't, you know, fully support all programs. There's many pieces of like students are often going to their academic advisors to, you know, try and sort out these different issues when they run into them. And again, as I noted earlier, it is a little bit hit and miss, but some students saying, you know, like my academic advisor is great, like they help me figure it all out, and other academic advisors basically say like, you know, go and figure it out on your own and come back to me when you have, and sort of, you know, it's leaving the student having to do all the work on their end, which is an additional stressor on top of the fact of, you know, they already have to do their courses and everything else that they're already being stressed about.
So we're going to move on here. The role you're running for this year is new. It was previously called the vice president. Could you kind of tell me what you think this role is going to entail?
Yeah, sure thing. So yeah, so as you noted, so this role is slightly new. It's a sort of a rebranding of the previous vice president portfolio. So this portfolio is mainly focused on the external relationships that WUSA has. So focusing on those advocacy pieces that WUSA works on, mainly advocating to different levels of government, both on the provincial, federal, and local level. So this, you know, can include everything from OSAP, tuition levels, mental health funding. A more local issue might be something like GRT or snow clearing. And so it's basically, you know, being that student voice in those meetings, you know, making sure that, you know, we're representing what the universities of Waterloo students want to see changed at these different levels of government. When it comes to provincial and federal advocacy, we're part of 2 different external bodies called the Ontario Undergrad Student Alliance, or WUSA, and the Canadian Association of Student Alliance, called CASA. And basically, they are there to basically be our lobby group. And so as the VP-GSR, I would be the liaison sitting between, you know, WUSA and these organizations, and I would work to create, you know, policy and, you know, these advocacy stances that we then go to advocate to the government on, meeting with MPPs, meeting with MPs, to discuss basically the things that are impacting students and the ways that they can change, you know, legislation or laws to better support students, whether that's through like increased monetary support in certain areas, but even something like, you know, changing how a program operates is something that has been advocated on in the past.
So you mentioned being a student voice for the students here. How do you plan on keeping in touch with what the students actually want and accurately representing what the students need?
Yeah, sure thing. I think there's a mix of a few different things. So the first of which is just to make sure that, you know, WUSA has built out a very well-developed, you know, research platform called the Research Survey Platform, or RSP. And it's basically a way that we are able to gather aggregated data from students of like what their opinions are on certain issues, particularly when it comes to like advocacy issues like affordability, housing, tuition. We've been able to, you know, basically create this tool that allows us to gather that data directly from students. And so I, again, as in my role, I probably rely a large part on that, given that it, you know, is research that is coming directly from the students. Besides that, you know, making sure that I'm connected with my team, that's something I'm hoping, you know, to continue on this year. Is, you know, I know Horizon has made sure that the people who have been involved are very connected with both their societies on the ground, but also various clubs and organizations on campus, making sure that we have that sort of web of connections with students across campus, so that way we can receive sort of feedback throughout, making sure that we are working to represent, you know, as many students as we can.
So you mentioned earlier that you would be meeting with, you mentioned like members of, like you would be meeting with members of parliament, is that correct?
Yep.
Do you have an experience like kind of meeting like people like at that level? Do you think that's something that like, you know, in your experience you would be able to like handle and like advocate properly for the student body?
Yeah. So when I was president 3 years ago, as WUSA president, you also get the opportunity to meet with both MPs and MPPs. So I've sat in meetings with, I think it's almost 3 dozen that I counted last time I checked, various MPs and MPPs. So I've definitely operated at that level before. When it comes to WUSA, as I noted earlier, the Ontario Undergrad Student Alliance, they do have a lobby week, which they happen every year in November, where they go down to Queen's Park, they bring their advocacy briefs, and they meet with the MPPs to basically, you know, lobby them on the particular issues. So when I was president, I was able to do that as well. And so I've had the opportunity to work not only individually meeting with MPPs, but also as like a larger lobby effort that we is going out of like getting out to basically get the votes for particular issues. So yeah, I would say that, you know, I've been able to do it in the past. I'm hoping to, you know, continue to use that skill set going forward.
And with all these meetings that you're likely going to have to attend at the end of the day, we know that you are a student. How do you plan on balancing your academic life with these different things that you have to do as VP?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so when it comes to being an officer, you take that time off of school. So when I was president 3 years ago, I didn't take any classes for the first 2 semesters. I basically focused entirely on the role. And so because of that, you're also able to count it for co-op if that's something that, would interest people. I'm finishing up my degree now in this semester, so I'll actually be wrapping up by the time that my term actually starts in May. So luckily, I won't have the difficulty of balancing school as much when it comes to that. But I know that is something that, other students more directly, like the board of directors and the Senate candidates, have to deal with. I will say, when it comes to balancing things, it is something that I think WUSA has taught me well from when I was, WUSA president. It is, a full-time plus role of, you're working 50 to 60 hours a week on average, I would say. And this has really helped me when, after the fact, I've now come back to university, and when I returned to my studies, I was able to not only take an accelerated course load of 7 courses every semester, but I've also been involved with other areas on campus, not only WUSA itself on the board of directors, but then also AFSA, the Accounting and Finance Student Association, as well as being a Don, and some other roles as well just around campus. So I've definitely sort of gathered that time management skills that I'm able to use effectively in the role.
That's very good to know. Thank you.
So you mentioned that you're finishing your degree by the time your term starts. Do you think not being a student, like not being like in the student like mindset, will affect like your ability to perform your services at all?
It's one of those difficult pieces of, you want your officers to be able to, spend time in their role. You want them to basically have the time to do everything that they need to do, while at the same time you do want that connection with, the student experience and student thoughts on the ground. I will say that that is something that, historically, it has been a little bit of a challenge, particularly towards the end of like an officer's role, just because you sort of do get disconnected because you're not, again, like going to classes, you're not speaking with, your friends as much because, again, it is a very busy role. And that's something that, as I noted earlier, we're hoping to, combat with, making sure that we're trying to stay connected with both the team, but that the team themselves is also very connected with other people on campus. When it comes to the different pieces around like, that, like, I'm now going into it with both opinions because I've been at last time I was president where I was, kind of like a co-op student during the actual role itself. And I will say that there is still that sort of disconnect there, but it's, one of the things that you have to, work at and make sure that you're, spending time to prioritize at the same time as you're maintaining those connections. Yeah, is sort of what I'll say to that.
So speaking on your previous presidency, in the 2023 to 2024 WUSA presidency, you won with a confirmation vote while running unopposed. And again, this year you are running unopposed and are subject to a confirmation vote. What are your thoughts on that, and why do you feel like it's not as competitive?
There's a few pieces there. First of which I'll say, yeah, I'm very disappointed that there's nobody running against me. It's not really the exact same feeling on campus, or the excitement of actually having another person here beside me to debate. I know Samir, the presidential candidate, had put something on Reddit basically saying like, hey, if anyone's interested, we will get you the 100 signatures to run against us. And I think even with that, it's difficult finding students who are wanting to go for the roles. And it's been something that I've been thinking about, given that I was already claimed a previous year, and so I spent many time during my presidency sort of thinking about what the potential root causes might be. And I think there's I think it's not, a simple one problem. I think it's, multiple overlapping issues. And I think just sort of listing them off, the first of which would just be that, generally speaking, a lot of students on campus are in co-op programs. And so they have the ability to go out and find a job more specific to their career, whereas at other student unions, very often they lack co-op. And so a lot of student leaders, as a result, have these opportunities to go for roles like, officer positions at the student union without necessarily having to worry much about like, oh, if I'm spending my time here, am I giving up, the potential to have more job experience in the actual field that I'm interested in? On top of that as well, I think that the Waterloo sort of feelings around political involvement are very different. If you look at sort of what's been happening at Western with their student union election, their campaign teams are like 40 to 50 people like large, not even like people running, just like people getting involved on the ground, like interested in like supporting one candidate. And so it's a different, I don't know, it's just a different sort of culture that exists at Waterloo versus other schools. Could be for a variety of different reasons. I think one of the big reasons is that a lot of students who choose to come to Waterloo are very academically focused, which sort of ties into sort of, again, what I talked about earlier of like wanting to focus in a particular career field. And so that's probably one of the other big reasons. I think there's some other, more minor reasons why students are less interested in involved. I think there's been some historical problems in the past couple of years that people are potentially, concerned with. I also just, I think those are probably the big three. I had more earlier when I was thinking about it, but they seem to be slipping my mind now. But yeah, those definitely some overlapping issues, and as I say, I don't think it's one specific issue. I think it's a mix of many different things, and I think the result of that is what we have seen historically, which is a lot of uncompetitive elections, especially for the officer candidates who are having to give up, as I noted, a year of their time in order to do the role. Yeah.
Do you think more competitive elections would be better for like the student body and for WUSA?
I think that, yeah. I think, generally speaking, more competitive elections in any sense are usually better, right? Like, at the end of the day, if, you're only given one choice, it's not really that much of a choice. It's the same thing that, would happen in any election, I think at the end of the day, even if, there's only going to be one person winning it, I think the opportunity to have multiple people run does bring different perspectives and different ideas to the table. And I think it causes people to think, and it causes people to sort of get out there and sort of, campaign and, support different people. And I think it, does lead to a better sense of like representation in this idea of like, if there's, multiple choices, then you can sort of, look at all the platforms, you can like read up on all the people, and you can sort of make a determination of like who is best going to represent you. And in the case where there's not multiple people running, it's obviously you can't really do that as much. And so it is very difficult, and I think it does lead to almost a cyclical cycle. And this is something that I talked about many times when I was president, of like a cyclical cycle of like people aren't engaged, and that leads to less engagement just because people see that no one else is engaged. And it's a vicious cycle. And I was hoping the past couple of years, with the more student turnout and the more candidates who are running, like we would have sort of been in the escape of that cycle. But it seems like we've again sort of slipped back down again.
Right. And so, stepping into this role now, do you have any plans or ideas to increase that student engagement that we are losing?
Mm-hmm. I think I'll maybe leave that question more to the VPSE when they have an opportunity to give their debate. But I do think it is something that we do need to focus on. And when we have those discussions at board, I will definitely be pushing for those pieces. I think there are currently an investigation going on at the governance committee level of, what does it look like to support the officers. I just thought of the other thing that maybe a reason a lot of officers don't run is just it is a lot of work. And I've noted that a couple times throughout this of just like, 50 to 60 hours a week might not be for everyone. And, especially when a lot of that time is spent, in an office working on different pieces or in meetings with the university, it can be, very emotionally draining. That's something that I definitely felt towards the end of my presidency. I'm sure if you ask any of the previous candidates or previous presidents or officers, they'll note very similar feelings of just like it is very much a drain on your psyche and your mental health, and I think it is something that's very difficult. But yeah, I do think when it comes to sort of improving it in future years, it's again sort of turning that flywheel, trying to work against that negative cycle that we've been seeing. I think a lot of it has to do with continuing to support our clubs and societies, as they are sort of like the starting place for a lot of students when they get on campus, is being involved in these different groups on campus, and that is historically where we have seen a lot of involvement in WUSA begin, is essentially people will get involved with the different clubs or societies that exist, and then they'll start to work there for a little bit, and then they'll be interested in sort of like, what is that next step? And very often that next step is WUSA, and so that's why like during our year we've increased the amount that we're funding clubs, and we're also working with the different societies to make sure that they're up and running again. I know ASU had some problems the past couple of years where they were inactive, and I know that was something that one of the previous board members, Tham, really worked hard, as well as some other members, to sort of get the ASU back up and running. I've been trying to do the same thing at AFSA. They've been going through their own sort of governance issues, basically trying to make sure that these opportunities are available on campus, and to provide students that sort of first taste of like, what is it to get involved in the student leadership role, and then I find that will generally sort of lead down the line to more people interested in running for roles like this.
Sure. So you mentioned like you would like to see more people engaged. What are some of like your ideas for for increasing student engagement?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we noted that we were able to do this year was increase the amount that clubs get for sort of base funding. For the past, I think it's been 15 to 20 years almost, they've got $75 a semester as long as they completed their club's training. This year we've run another pilot program of increasing that number to $200 a semester, again, as long as they're completing their requirements. So we're hoping to see what impact that has on sort of the engagement, particularly for potentially the smaller clubs who historically would struggle more with finding funding. That is something that when we start to get the data back, we're hoping to review and sort of see. Besides that, again, like when we talk about cyclical problems, I think engagement's right along there with engagement with WUSA, right? Like I think one of those pieces of how do we fix engagement is just a slow culture shift. It's going to be pretty hard. I think again, I think students who come to Waterloo, as noted earlier, are very academically minded historically, and so there is more of a focus on getting good grades, making sure that you're setting yourself up for co-op, potentially over some of the other pieces. And that's not to say that's a bad thing or anything, but it is just to say that is something that I think I've observed throughout my time here at university. I think it's one of those pieces that also like COVID has had an impact on us. I'm sure people are tired of hearing that, but just the levels of engagement that we've seen coming out of COVID are way lower than they were beforehand. And so I hope that as the people who start to come through university are sort of the people who are potentially less impacted or impacted in different ways by COVID, that there is a little bit of a shift that happens.
Sure.
And speaking about the Horizon Party, when did you join the Horizon Party, and what motivated you to join instead of running independently?
Yeah, sure thing. So I joined the Horizon Party would have been a couple months ago when we started to have sort of discussions of, what that would look like. I was always potentially interested in running again for an officer position after running for the board of directors. And so this was something that I had been thinking about, and I was having discussion with some of my fellow board members about would they be interested in running with me on a platform of some kind. And so I was actually the one who approached some of the different people first, and they said that, we'll think about it and we'll let you know. And then comes back a week later and they're like, actually, reverse Uno, do you want to join our team? And so we talked a little bit about platform and some of the things that they were hoping to continue to work towards, and it just so happened that it aligned very closely with things that I wanted to support, and so that was when I decided to join the party. And then after which we had continuous ongoing conversations about like who else, what other student leaders do we know on campus who would be potentially interested in, but also who would be very good in the role. So that was sort of how it happened, and yeah, it's been a good time since then.
So you kind of talked about it earlier, but I'm going to ask you to elaborate on it a bit more. Kind of tell me, like, what do you think are like the biggest issues on campus this year that you would like immediately want to focus on from day one?
I think there's a mix of different pieces. I think that when it comes to what is the biggest issue, I think generally there is just like a sense in the post-secondary sector of, I don't want to call it malaise, but it's almost just like a feeling of stress, not only on students but on the sector as a whole. And I think a large part of that stems from many different issues that are happening across Canada when it comes to things like affordability, the housing crisis. And when we're talking about bigger issues, I don't think there's many bigger issues than that. And as VPGSR, that is something that would be probably one of the key things that I'd be working on throughout my term is working with our provincial lobbying groups to make sure that we provide funding for students through things like OSAP, through CASA and the Canadian Student Grant to make sure that students are getting the support that they need. I know Waterloo recently has put a halt on a lot of their major construction projects because they're going through a water crisis where they don't have enough water to support the new buildings that are being put up. So that's likely going to have a larger impact, potentially not next year, but going 10 years into the future, as housing supply is directly correlated to the cost that it's going to cost for students. So working it out with Waterloo to make sure that that is something that gets resolved is probably another big item that's going to be put on the list this year. I think generally speaking, those are the big things, and because they're big things, they're going to take a lot of work, and very often it's going to be multiple years of work. It's not something that I can snap my fingers sadly and make changes. If only I could, but it's one of those things that we'll continue to push for and work with our stakeholders on.
It is big work, and for something as big as affordable housing, how do you actually plan on advocating and actually pushing for something like that?
Yeah. I think when it comes to things like affordable housing, there's a few different pieces. I think it comes down to, at many times, being in those meetings, making sure that we're communicating the fact that hey, students are struggling. As noted, Waterloo is going through this water crisis, and so what does it look like now that they are dealing with the situation? How do they go forward with continuing to construct housing, even in the cases where they're not able to, or they're running into these issues with water supply? I think one of the big things, long-term dream would be more government funding directly for housing to provide sort of a counter level to sort of the private construction that happens. Because then that would work to push down prices for everyone. It's one of those things that many smart people have worked on solving this housing crisis, and I think it's tied into a lot of other problems that exist in society currently. And again, as noted, if I had a magic wand, there are many things that I would I tomorrow, but housing affordability is one of those pieces that sadly I cannot snap my fingers and fix, but it is something that I would be continued to devote myself to work towards. And that starts with those key stakeholder meetings and making sure that we're outlining that hey, students are struggling in this area, and we need support, and I just hope that we can get that message across clear to the various different stakeholders, as well as making sure that if there are other avenues in the meantime, like getting students more support, that we do that.
So speaking of affordable housing and just generally things that you plan on doing during your tenure, so obviously you'll be speaking to stakeholders. Say that they push back against something that you propose to them. How do you plan on working around that, or kind of forcing your idea through?
Yeah, sure thing. I think this is something that it depends on the situation. I think a very good potential thing to look at that happened most recently this year would be Bill 33. So Bill 33 was a big bill that the Ontario government passed most recently, and it affected many different things in the education sector. More specifically, Section 21.1 affected directly the ways that student unions specifically could collect fees. And that was something that this year, was one of those pieces that we wanted to do advocacy on, because hey, this section of the bill is going to hurt student unions, and it's not something that the people were willing to listen on, right? And it's one of those pieces that if if they don't listen, then you sort of have to, use your other resources available to you, including, making sure that you're out there, whether that's, making sure that you get like signatures for campaigns, or you basically sort of work to advocate on different pieces through other means. Because at the end of the day, if the politicians aren't going to be the ones to listen to you, you hope that your fellow students, as well as the other general electorate, will listen to you. So it is one of those pieces that, you have to go through whatever avenue is available to you. And as noted earlier, it is, slow grinding work, but it is, very important work. Going into next year, I'm sure Bill 33 will continue to be an issue that we work to address. I know CFS has, been working on that, but it is one of those different pieces where, like, we're trying to get things done.
And on a similar note, this coming year, we're going to see some major changes from the province, including a tuition raise, OSAP reform, and a new fee mandate, which are all being discussed. How will you work to influence these discussions, and how can WUSA help mitigate the impact of any policies that are actually implemented?
Yeah, sure thing. I think, I think as noted earlier, like, these are some of the big issues that students are, dealing with, and, these are big potential changes that are coming down the pipeline that will affect them. When it comes to things like OSAP, support, I think this is something that I've worked on throughout my time at WUSA, especially when I was on, the WUSA delegates that were sent for their GAs. I, worked actively on, some of the different materials that are put out, like those actual lobby briefs, making sure that the recommendations in those are, outlined very clearly, and making sure that they are, based in fact, and that they support students. When it comes to things like the tuition potential review that's going to happen, that is, again, another big thing that is set to impact students. During my year, the Ontario government commissioned a report called the Blue Ribbon Panel, or they commissioned a report called the Sustainability in Public Sector report, and it was, nicknamed the Blue Ribbon Panel report. And it was basically a report that looked into, like, how are we sustainably funding the post-secondary sector in Ontario. And there were, plenty of different recommendations that came out of it. And then it was sent to the government, and the government threw it in the garbage. And they did not follow many of the recommendations that were outlined in that report. I was actually taking a look at it this morning to, jog my memory, and it talks about the fact that, like, hey, Ontario students, the amount of grants that you're receiving is only 57% as compared to the average non-Ontarian Canadian when it comes to the funding that's provided to the post-secondary institution. It's one of those pieces that, back in the day, when it comes to, like, where funding was coming from, 2/3 of all funding for, us to go to school came from grants that were paid for by the province, whereas nowadays only 1/3 of that is made up of grants. At the same time, schools have, relied a lot more upon international and out-of-province students to sort of fill those budget gaps that exist. And so when it comes to these different pieces, it is one of those things that we need to push back on, of, like, hey, what has changed that, 20 years ago, the government was able to provide this much funding, and yet it's reduced so drastically, The government funding, if you go back on it and look at it on a notional level, is lower than it was in 2008, right? So that's, almost 2 decades now that, the funding hasn't actually increased. It's one of those pieces that, again, we need to work towards. I think, something that we should potentially look at is what happened back in the 70s. Back in the 70s, a very similar thing happened where, the government was very quickly cutting the support that was provided for students to go to school. And there was, a massive protest that happened. Student unions bussed people down to Queen's Park, for a few days, and basically said, like, hey, we are your future. We are, what is Ontario going to be in 20 years if we're not, providing this education and support for the future of Ontario? And it's one of those pieces that, I think should be looked into again. Yeah.
Sure. So you mentioned earlier in your interview that you've seen, like, in Western and, like, some other schools, they have, like, much larger, like, elections. Do you think, like, when you're, like, confirmed, would you be communicating with, like, other student unions as well about some of these issues and kind of try to find, like, a consensus, especially for provincial issues?
Yep. So for a lot of these student unions, we also work with them on our lobby group, the Ontario Undergrad Student Alliance, and so I'll work very closely with those members who are on that. There are a couple universities who aren't a part of that group. They're part of, a different organization called CFS Ontario. And then there's other groups that sort of go and do their own thing, including UFT. And so I think when it comes to dealing with some of these big issues, you have to work with all parties involved. You have to make sure that there is that, communication back and forth on many of these different big issues, to make sure that, there is a united front, and make sure that we are, collectively fighting for the same things. I think it's one of those pieces that, it's a lot easier to walk into a room with a politician and say, like, hey, I'm here to represent 250,000 students from across Ontario than, hey, I'm here to represent, the University of Waterloo students. They do hit very differently, and, the minister who's in charge of that portfolio is very aware, and so making sure that, we're all working together on these big issues is one of the ways that we can, sort of combat the size of them.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And you mentioned earlier kind of like some funding issues, kind of like how, universities rely on like international students a lot, for example. Do you feel like the current funding system that we have is like sustainable long term? And like, is that something you'd want to change if you had the capability to do so?
Yeah. So sort of jumping back to the Blue Ribbon panel report again, like I think the conclusion that they came to in that report is it's not a sustainable funding model. 1/3 of all revenue now comes from international students. And so it's one of those pieces that, if you look at the university and you've been, keeping up to date on sort of what's been released in the news, you won't be surprised by the fact that like they keep noting their budget deficit. I know during my year they were projected for a $75 million budget deficit. And, from what I hear, they've, been putting a lot of, things in place, including a hiring freeze, on the University of Waterloo campus to basically reduce the amount that they're spending to try and reduce this budget deficit. But you have to look at the other side of things. Like if you're not hiring people, that means less supports, less, professors, TAs, It's one of those pieces where, the university is now put in the tough decision where they're starting to cut programs. Throughout different faculties, and so it's it's sad to see, and so when it comes to like going forward, it's one of those things that it's going to have to be addressed eventually. You look at some of the other universities that are out there, they're in, crazily enough, a much worse position than even we're in, with Queen's and Laurentian both looking like they're not going to make it the next 3 years without going bankrupt. Laurentian in fact already went bankrupt a couple years ago, and they actually had to go into bankruptcy court to basically fight with their creditors to continue to maintain or continue to stay open, and then the Ontario government said, actually no, you can't do that anymore. You have to come to us. So it's one of those pieces that like as the screws continue to tighten and the universities continue to run these budget deficits, eventually something's going to break somewhere, and based on what happens there, we'll sort of see what happens and what steps the province is going to choose to take. But as noted, it's not a sustainable funding model, and I think it is something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Do you think it's something that can be addressed with like a few small changes here and there, or something that would need to be largely overhauled in order to like develop into a sustainable long-term model?
I think there's some pretty big changes that have to happen. I think we've slowly got here through a lot of small mistakes, and I sadly don't think we're in a place where small improvements are going to get us to a place where it fixes things, particularly because of the trajectory we're currently set at. When we look at some of the other universities that are out there and the budget deficits that they're running and the financial position that they look to be in going into the next couple of years, I don't know how many of them are going to, as I noted, survive those couple of years. And what's most likely going to happen is they're going to have to run to the government for, don't want to call it a bailout, but like a one-time support payment of some kind. And it's one of those pieces that if we look back to what it was like in the early 2000s, again, a large portion of the funding came from the government through the actual like student grants. And it's one of those pieces that if those, continued to operate as they did back then, I'm sure we wouldn't be in the same position we are now, with the changes in the grants that have been, again, frozen since 2008, and the changes in tuition levels, which have been frozen since 2019. So it's put the university sector in a little bit of a squeeze for sure. And I do think that there are going to have to be some major changes. And I think when we hit a crisis, I think the government's going to have to try and make some of those major decisions. And I hope that we can be there as students stand united and say like, hey, these are the changes that should be made.
So moving forward, you clearly have a lot of work ahead of you. And what are the biggest challenges that you see in your role, and how do you think you'll be able to overcome them?
Sure thing. I think we've noted, some of the bigger changes or bigger challenges in this discussion already. I think one of the biggest one will just be the fact that, you're not going to get buy-in 100% from all politicians, right? People will have different opinions on things. You're going to be working with different perspectives, even not only at the political level, but also just between student unions. That's often been a little bit of a, an issue in the past is, very often, different people disagree on, stances that should be taken, steps that should be taken. And, it's one of those pieces where, acting in this role of VPGSEI, you are at times acting as a mediator, trying to work it out with multiple groups of people to come to a collective decision or voice that can be then, brought on further. So that'll definitely be one of the bigger challenges that we deal with as I go into this year. Besides that, probably, the other big one will just be, it's not a lot of time. 1 year, though it seems like a long time, goes by quick. Speaking as someone who's already, experienced 1 year in the officer position before, you blink your eyes and then it's over. So it's one of those pieces that, there's so many, big pieces and different things that we're hoping to tackle. But very often, it's the economics game of, you have limited resources, limited time. Where can we best allocate those to get the best impact for students?
Okay, well, yeah, that's our time. We'll give you the chance to give a closing statement as we close it out. And yeah,
Okay.
Do you have anything you'd like to say as we end it off?
No, sounds good. Yeah, I appreciate you guys taking the time to, give this interview today. Hopefully things have been, going good at Imprint. It is, as I noted earlier, my second time giving one of these interviews. Always excited to come back and, talk to the camera. A little disappointed. Sad to say, the turnout that we're getting here today. Hopefully we got a few people online who are joining us, who are able to sort of see. But again, I think as noted earlier in this conversation, getting that sort of flywheel turning again, getting people more involved is something that I'm hoping to continue my work towards. And I'm sure Horizon has the same, platforms that we've outlined that we are working to get people more engaged. And yeah, I'll sort of leave it at that. And I wish everyone the best.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That was Rory Norris for running for Vice President of Government Stakeholder Relations. We'll be taking a 10-minute break, and then we'll be back with Samir Sharma. Testing. Okay. Not sure it worked.
Okay. Now we would like to invite up Samir Sharma, who is running for president, for his interview.
You gotta like hold down the button, yeah.
Hello, hello.
Hello, good day. Okay, first off, just to get us started, could you tell us a bit about yourself, your full name, your program, your year, and tell us a bit about why you're running for president?
Would love to. My name's Samir Sharma. I'm in 2B, and I'm running for WUSA president with Team Horizon. Couple things about me. I'm also in honors math. Should have mentioned that. I'm running with Team Horizon because I think genuine change is needed and can happen on this campus. I've seen over my last year serving on board the potential of a strong, dedicated board, and I truly believe with Horizon, we continue great efforts on campus, from affordability to culture, education, and the University Senate. With a strong Team Horizon and me as president, I think genuine, good change can happen for Waterloo students, and that's why I'm running.
So you mentioned being in 2B. Tell me a bit about how do you feel like, being such like not like a younger student, but do you plan on taking time off to like while you're in this role, and how do you think that will affect your academic career?
Definitely. I plan to do this role as 3 cooperative terms. I'm lucky in honors math I gave them cooperative terms, so I'm able to do that. I think I have an experience now with 1 year on the WUSA board, and with a strong team of younger, older, and experienced students, I will be able to work hard as president. My experience, my team's experience, and taking the full year off on a co-op term will able to let me be successful in the role.
Okay, thank you. And similar to what we asked Rory, you're running unopposed this year in the election as president. Why, in your personal opinion, do you think it was so not competitive, and what do you plan on doing to increase student engagement?
Definitely disappointed that we have a less competitive election this year. The day before nominations closed, as Rory talked about, I put a post on the Waterloo Reddit saying, hey, I truly believe Waterloo students deserve a choice in competitive elections. If you are willing to run, I will get you your 100 nominations. Run against me, run against someone else, just run. Sadly, had no takers, but I do not think that detracts from my ability and my skills as president. We have seen now, under the new WUSA governance structure, a majority of years having acclaimed or no one running. When the first year, there was only 1 vice president candidate and no president. The next year, both the president and vice president were acclaimed. We then had 2 years of strong competitive elections where every seat was competitive. Now this year, 2 of 3 are going to be claimed again. I think it's a genuine problem that WUSA needs to tackle. We've made great strides with voter turnout, going from almost 3% 3 years ago to over 20% for the last 2 years. We need to do the same for officer candidates. This is the job of the board, this is the job of WUSA, to reach out to Waterloo students and get strong student leaders. As Rory mentioned, it comes from our societies, it comes from our clubs, it comes from our services. It comes from showing students that WUSA actually gives a damn and can actually make an impact on them.
Sure. So I know in past years there have been events such as if you vote, you get entered to win a raffle for a laptop. Kind of tell me, like, do you have any ideas for like how you would want to like increase turnout?
I think I'm very proud of our elections team in order to get over 20% for the last 2 years, and I'm very hopeful we stay over 20% for this year as well. Obviously, the goal is 100% everywhere, and I think voter apathy is the biggest risk in student unions. I think efforts such as MacBook and other initiatives are fine as long as students are making informed choices. And that means, as I said before, students need to be able to tell that their student leaders make actual, progressive, real change. An actual vote needs to make a difference. Otherwise, why would you vote? So I think proving it through leadership, as Roy said, it's a turn wheel. The more we prove it, the more people will vote, the more engaged, the more outcomes. So I think just continuing that cycle and making sure that we actually give a damn is the most important.
Right, there are lots of incentives that you can give, but how can you convince students to vote when there are almost no candidates to vote for?
That's fair. I think it comes back to track record. With Team Horizon last year, we reopened the Bomber. As Roy said, we tripled clubs funding. We ended the partnership with Teching On. We made real, genuine wins for students. And I think from that experience, my experience on our governance committee, chairing the Student Life Endowment Fund, other work in WUSA, I have proven, and our team has proven, through many efforts, our clubs, our societies, our services, we are able to make real change. And students deserve real change. I think that's why I encourage them to vote for Horizon, vote for me president, and our strong board and Senate candidates.
So yeah, speaking of your, talk about your campaign, kind of tell me like what are some of like your biggest issues that you want to focus on as soon as you're put into office?
Sure. I think my job as president is, first of all, real, genuine change. Number two, encourage my team. I can't do any of this with a strong Horizon team. Our platform is centered on 4 points: advancing affordability, campus culture, real educational changes at the university, and the university senate. This ranges from securing the Pay What You Can program. Just yesterday during the taco event, I had the opportunity to talk to 2 students who are doing unpaid TAing right now. They talked about how much this program means to them, and securing that funding would be massive. Students want a concert. We haven't had a real concert, if you don't count Dylan Francis and the Glow Party, since 2006. It's been a while. Something like the Bomber, which you brought up. It's called the lounge plan we passed at last AGM, actually getting the renovation implemented. But also, it isn't just, I would say, more fun stuff like this. It's stuff like real educational degree tracking. Right now, your university advisor can see what class you need to graduate. At every other school in Canada, you can see on their Quest equivalent what classes you need. Why can't you see it here? Why can't we have simple basic tools and have to resort to tools like UW Flow? I think we have a strong platform. I encourage students to visit waterloohorizon.ca. We have a strong, detailed platform with proven leaders who will make a real difference.
And you mentioned that students want a concert, right? So there's a lot of plan into the budgeting for a big concert like that. And how do you plan on balancing student desires with financial constraints?
100%. We have big risks like Bill 33 going on, but students tell us we are a student union. We need to do what students want. We have a strong staff team that helps prepare our budgets. We've introduced a new vice president of student experience, Nick's on our team is running for, in order to make this happen. We have our staff advisors help make our budget each year, and it is possible. Other schools run concerts. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We can figure out how they run it and do it similarly. We have strong staff, we have strong student leaders, and I believe with the real time and effort, we can make a concert Waterloo students are proud of and actually enjoy.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the Pay What You Can program, Rory mentioned it as well. I'm going to ask you to elaborate on it a bit. How do you plan on implementing it, and what would it look like when it's actually like in full effect?
Sure. So right now the Pay What You Can program was established by the last WUSA board as a pilot program in the Bomber. Right now from 10:30 to 5:30, you can get a meal where you pay between $0 and $5. It was only funded for 1 year or the one-time allocation of $100,000 from reserves. That means if nothing happens, this program ends. And we've seen through many students that this is a really important program. One of Horizon's commitment is figuring out real lasting funding. If that's incorporating that budget, if that's incorporating fees, figuring out how real students can get real impact from this.
Yeah.
So many students that Imprint spoke to identified food prices on campus as a concern this year. What would you do to address this?
1 second, please.
No problem.
100%. We've seen affordability be a massive concern year over year. One person on our team, Mudge, is the head of the food support service on campus. He's seen it firsthand. We've seen it in our RSP data at WUSA. Students can't afford right now everything. With tuition, with everything, you can't afford it. What we try to do at WUSA and what I continue pushing for is our food alternatives need to be cheap, healthy, and accessible. This includes like a plan internally called the C-Store plan. This is a doubling of Flock Stop that the last board approved, but has not been implemented, including fresh groceries at Flock Stop. Right now, you have to go maybe Faras, maybe further, and it's expensive. Can we get real cheap alternatives on campus? We have proven leaders in our team who've shown in Horizon that we can make it happen. Real, genuine innovation is possible. It's not magic. Other student unions do it, other places do it. We can make real change too in those areas.
And so you mentioned the fresh food. Why was it approved but not implemented previously? And how will you ensure implementation this time?
Sure. So funding was approved for the project. Right now, the way it works is WUSA has to work with the university for any capital project. And I'll be frank, right now it's hard. The university is currently undergoing a massive budget shortfall of almost $90 million unmitigated and a full hiring freeze. That means if any staff position at the university isn't filled, or someone leaves, it's not filled again. This means we have to work with people like plant ops, It's hard, and they have main priorities. We're also suffering through a deferred maintenance crisis with almost every building on the campus needing massive renovations. Though we have funding approved, we have to work with our commercial operations team to how to feasibly implement it. That means getting renderings, Class D designs from architects, and actually making it happen. That means talking to the university and saying, hey, this impacts you. WUSA manages the SLC, but that doesn't mean the university isn't responsible. It means talking to plant ops. I know just recently they posted a new senior project manager, like head of project manager role. Working with that person, figuring out how we can make it faster. What problems have caused for the last few years to make it not possible? What can we change to make it happen? And it's not going to be easy. That's why we have a strong board team, a strong Senate team, capable people in different roles that can all work together on a unified platform to make each one of these outcomes happen.
Do you think once you're in office, like a plan of yours would be to hold the university more accountable for some of its shortcomings?
I think definitely. Our budget crisis isn't just the province, it's also the university. I think as president, you sit on the university senate and have monthly meetings with the university executive. In the next 16 months, we are getting a new university president, a new university provost, a new head of academics, a new head of research. It's a pivotal time. We need to be able to see our new student leaders, new president starts in June, a month after I'll start if I win, hold them accountable and say, hey, we know this has been many, as Roy was saying, it's tiny problems over time, but that your current leaders need to face it. Your current leaders need to fix those problems. Definitely. I think one thing that's important is we've had delays with the bomber this year. That's part of the university's problem. How can we talk to them? How can we make sure that, hey, actual changes to happen and holding them to account?
And how do you plan on leading WUSA to accurately represent student voices on non-academic issues?
I think that's part of the reason Team Horizon pushed for last year the creation of the Vice President Student Experience. We created a role dedicated to this. We saw it's a short gap. WUSA has a system called RSP, Representative Survey Platform. We do basically, at random, you're selected, and it represents faculties, genders, equity groups, everyone. We get actual data. Another thing we're working for is something called the Advocacy Committee. This is hopefully going to be finalized the next month. It's basically a governance reform within WUSA to have an actual body of merging some committees and some more technical details to make sure that actual student voice is represented within WUSA, and that, yes, we're focused on academics, we're focused on campus culture. Third spaces, we're focused on affordability. Academics is important, but it's not be-all. When you're going to look back from university, you're not going to care about your classes. You're going to care about your student experience here. And that's what we want to push for. That's what we want to make sure that happens here.
How accurate do you think this data is if not every student or like a large number of students don't participate in certain surveys?
From my knowledge, over 2,000 students about in each survey, and that's a representative survey of the university, but that isn't our only method. We host roundtables through our ownership consultation committee. We do intercepts with our advocacy team. We do many other methods. This is one tool. And part of electing your student leaders is electing those who have a real platform of change to actually make it happen. Our data is important, our surveys are important, but real student leaders with a real platform are equally as important. So I'd encourage people, see the real change, be that real change.
And if your candidate for VP of Student Experience hypothetically doesn't win, how will you work with the independent party candidate when you're in office?
I think I'm more than happy to work with anyone. Last year, Aria, Rory, they weren't on Horizon. We worked with them with a lot of projects. I think I've had wonderful conversations with Majla and the other VP Student Experience things. What matters is creating real change, and all reason we're fighting for students. That can be with my team, that can be with others, but what matters is Horizon's proven we're changing, and those of us who gets in are gonna push for that real change.
Do you worry at all about, say you do have a conflict with the independent candidate, do you worry about that resulting in a deadlock where nothing really gets done because you guys can't reach an agreement?
I think that's why we have a board, the office report to the board. We have different methods. I think having different opinions is important. That's why elections exist. We have different surveys. I think at the end of the day, our job as student leaders is to interpret the data. I think it's gonna be possible. Reporting back to the board, listening to me, listening to our students, and having different opinions, realizing we're all working for students. We're all looking for genuine change. I think this year we've proven in Horizon, we can work with independents. Being a party just means we think us as candidates are genuine people who are able to make that real change. That doesn't mean there aren't others, and we're willing to work with them for that real change.
Okay, thank you. Moving forward, last year you ran on a campaign of creating third spaces for students. Do you feel that goal was adequately accomplished during your time on the board, or is there more work to do?
I think The day WUSA has no more work to do, WUSA shouldn't exist. Every year, we're always going to have more stuff to do. One thing I really enjoyed last year is I would chair the Student Life Endowment Fund, where I gave over $400K away to student life experiences through our board, many other people involved. But one thing I really liked was helping do some space renovations. We got a new, I think it's called an equity office in Renison. It's basically a place, it's a kitchenette for students who are off campus to do there. We're looking into funding projects like Biology Undergrad Student Association. We funded them new couches. We're looking into the Bomber expansion, looking into other spaces. It is a never-ending target, and we should always be pushing to meet that impossible target. I think that every year the board should be pushing more third spaces for more culture. Each year we need to do more, and each year we will do more.
So obviously this is going to be your second term. Kind of tell me, like, what is your biggest regret from your last term, and how do you plan on rectifying that going forward?
I think the hardest part is WUSA is a very complicated organization to learn. It took me time. I think my first term was a lot of learning, experience, and figuring out how stuff works, who to talk to, how to get it done. And due to that, I don't think I was fully able to do everything I want. And also, second year academics definitely took me for a ride after 1A. I think now being full-time on co-op, having a dedicated team that's been around for a while, new people, old people, I've been here for a year, we're able to make it now. We know how it works. We know the system inside and out with proven and new student leaders that are going to be able to not have those same shortcomings. And when we do have shortcomings, talk about it. Be able to say, hey, just because one door's closed doesn't mean another one opens. How can we make sure that our goals still happen and that actual change is happening?
Thank you. UW ran a $75 million deficit for the 2024-2025 fiscal year with a plan to reduce spending over the next several years. How will you work to maintain services amid budget cuts?
As I mentioned before, this is one of the most critical times of the university existence. Students should be mad. Their classes are getting bigger, their services are being cut, and it is hard. We are seeing, again, 75 million. Or they're expecting to go back to budget in 3 years. I honestly don't know if that's happening. Us as students need to push back. Because the university is struggling is no excuse for students to pick up the burden. That isn't a transfer to student fees. We can't afford stuff either. It means working together progressively, making real optimizations and changes to make stuff work. It's being collaborative, not fighting each other. It means that when we have our meetings, how can we support each other? Us supporting the university and the university supporting WUSA to actually help those students. Students are the core of this university. There are a lot of staff, but there are over 30,000 of us students. That's what matters. How can we make sure that, yes, we're in a crisis. How can we work together? How can we work with campus housing, food services, different areas to make real, genuine change and make sure that while they're struggling, costs aren't passed on to students and that student experience is still growing and thriving.
So you mentioned students should be angry about certain things. They should stand up to the university. If protests or any form of, say, disobedience were to occur in order to push back against the university, would you still side with students against, like with what they're angry about?
I think student voice is important. Students need to get angry, they need to get loud. This isn't just a government, it's a school, it's everyone. Everyone in this university has to be accountable, everyone in this province and country needs to be accountable. If that means getting loud, I'll be loud. We've seen students win fights over Technion last year, over divestment. We've seen real change. Our voice is important and we need to use it. So yes, I would be fully in support.
You moving forward, when did you join the Horizon Party and what motivated you to join instead of running independently as well?
During my first year, I had experience in MathSoc, on their board, on their council, and met some really cool people. One of them was Remington. Talking to them before last election, I realized a lot of the change I wanted to see on the campus, Horizon meant for, and I was able to join the team. I've been part of the team for over a year now, and I'm really excited to join again and be able to lead a strong, independent team that's proven victories and has many exciting goals. I wouldn't be running again if I genuinely didn't think we can get stuff done, if genuine change could happen, and that we are proven leaders who are actually going to get it done. Student unions in Canada have this mentality of nothing ever happens, that because something's happened for 20 years ago, that's what happened today. It's a rot that infects it. We need to be able to say, hey, how can we be better? How each day we can find a new efficiency, a new program. Students genuinely matter. We need to matter to them. How can we prove that? And the onus isn't on students, it's on us as WUSA, and I think we're able to do it.
Yeah.
Would you like to go more into specifics of the goals that you have for your time in office?
I would love to. So some of our platform was mentioned for pay what you can. Another is food services. Next year, they're planning a meal plan review. Right now, they have something called a 50% off system that many students don't like, where you get 50% off your meal plan, but you pay it back by getting 50% off. In the end, it results in you actually paying the full price, but it's an illusion of 50% off. We want to push back against this. Another thing is tenant insurance. Most students are required to buy tenant insurance, and it's expensive. WUSA currently offers health and dental. How are we able to offer that too? Another one is Bill 33. That's going to be a massive fight next year. I want to be able to fight for student services to stay on campus. That's a big part of our platform. Some other stuff is the Great Hall. WUSA has something called a capital budget. This means each year students pay fees into a budget that the board can spend on capital improvements. We want to be able to renovate that space into, that furniture is older than me. Can we get a ping pong table, a pool table, actual stuff for the students to enjoy? I see students enjoying the Connect 4 and Tetris all the time. How can we make that happen? Some other stuff I'm personally really passionate for with Horizon is Senate. The Student Senate controls all of your classes, what grade requirements, all that stuff. Students can't really get motions on Senate right now. How can we have a clear process for real movement when students can happen there? Another big one is undergrad TA and RA rights. Right now, the graduate students under policy 33 at the university have guaranteed rights working an average of 10 hours on campus. How do offers set out? How do you dispute your job if something happens? Undergrads don't have those rights and they deserve it. I'm going to be pushing for on the Undergrad Student Relation Committee, which the WUSA president sits on, for a policy to be created on undergrad rights with my fellow Horizon members.
Mm-hmm. So you kind of mentioned this at the end of your answer there, but I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit. Students have complained about hitting fees such as things like dental, like expansion fees, things that they can choose to opt out of, but they aren't really given like clear directions towards how they can do that. Kind of tell me like, how do you plan on like, kind of like counteracting that during your time in office?
I think transparency of our student union is important, both from us, from the university. I think a lot of campaigns I've seen during this election are about making university fees more transparent. That means students will be able to see real budget breakdowns and real fee breakdowns of where it's going. I think on the university end, that means pushing on Senate for real breakdown of where fees are going and how they're approved. Right now, students don't know many of the methods. How can we make that happen? In WUSA, that means having a clear budget process. Right now, one thing I've been pushing for this year is having what we used to have something called a budget document, which is basically a 20 to 30 page outline of exactly how your fee is broken down. We have a breakdown right now, we want a more detailed breakdown. So I think that's something I care for. I think students pay a lot, you're right. But that also means the services are valuable to them. Students wouldn't be paying this. Health and dental really makes an impact. Pay what you can makes an impact. WUSA services make an impact. How can we show that value? How can we show where that money is going for students' benefit? So I definitely agree those are major parts that we want to work on next year.
Sure. So you mentioned as well the Student Senate, which controls like grade requirements and such. You mentioned wanting to incorporate more student voices into that Senate. Kind of tell me like what's your plan for doing that during your time?
Definitely. The Senate itself right now is going under an engagement review. That's happening right now. I hope when my term starts in May to join that engagement review, to see how we can get student senators to have more voices there. I think that's why Horizon's running 5 Senate candidates, to be able to have real impactful members who are going to make that change. I think that's working with all senators, student, faculty, and admin alike in order to get that done, in order to get engagement of real changes there as well.
And what do you want your impact to be overall once it's all said and done?
I think one thing I tell a lot of people, your year at WUSA isn't impacted by the stuff you do in your year. It's the last 3 years plus your year, and you're going to impact the next 3 years. I think my year is a real continuation of the last year, but also setting up for future years. Creating modernizations, efficiencies, creating real change that's going to catalyze over time. Our goals are not going to be done in 1 year. We're going to have new ones, and we're going to continue that fight.
So kind of tell me, what are some of like the biggest challenges you kind of anticipate going into the second term?
I think the biggest one is Bill 33. This is an effort from the government, the Supporting Students in Choice Initiative, that would cripple basically all student services on campus if implemented. This would mean, yes, you can operate out some fees, but critical services, critical equity, critical support, critical advising, writing, all these services would no longer exist. Stuff like Imprint would be impacted. I think working with my VP GSR, working with our entire executive team, working with our staff, working with our board to fight back, working with the Ontario Undergrad Student Alliance, working with the CASA, who's our federal lobbying org, to push back against the bill and show the province that there's real value here, that we can push back. Another one, I think, is the university. As I pushed before, it's a critical time where almost all of university admin is turning over. That means setting up good relations and pushing for students with them. How can we make changes? I think my biggest challenges are going to be those two, and I hope to work with my team to fight these and make real, genuine change in order to impact them.
And how do you plan on working with your VP GSR to talk to the provincial government specifically about Bill 33?
Definitely. I think an element of that is our VP GSR normally is our delegate to WUSA, which stands for the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance. They have quarterly meetings with the ministry itself. This doesn't mean we're not going to do our own work. That doesn't mean we're not going to be pushing on our own with our staff. I think the current VP, Remington, who does that role, has been very involved in that. I think that means going to an ADCO week. That means proving value. That means talking to the ministry often and also looking at other schools. We're not alone in this impacting us. Schools like Western, Queen's, U of T, all having efforts. How can we work together? There's something called the Coalition. It is all the colleges in Ontario and most of the universities who came together and went to the province and said, hey, this is a bad idea. We get about transparency, we agree, but cutting fees is not the move to support students. So working with groups with that, making sure we have a united voice to the government that students need to be protected and that students care and value these. These fees, these services wouldn't exist if they weren't important to students.
Okay, and now we'll give you a chance to just say some final remarks, why people should trust you as a president.
I think over the last year of Horizon, we've proven big wins. Bomber, club funding, Technion partnership not being renewed. I think we've come back with the real dedicated platform with detail of how we're going to get stuff done. Horizon's a team that's going to be able to make real, genuine change that doesn't impact your very life. From affordability to campus culture to education, we have proven student leaders, new student leaders who are willing to fight for you, and I'm willing to fight for you. And thank you for hosting this interview.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. That was Samir Sharma. He will be running, well, I guess he's already elected as president. We'll take another 10-minute break, and then we will have the debate for Vice President of Student Experience. Hello? Okay. Okay, you guys are good. Okay, and we're back. To my left, starting from my left, we have Majlin, who's running independently, and then we have Nix, who's running with the Horizon Party. This will be a debate. Depending on time, they will be free to take as much time as they want to answer the questions, but depending on time constraints, there may be some implemented. Yeah. So just to get started, we'll start with you, Majlin. Just introduce yourself, give us your program and your year, and just give us a quick statement about why you want to run for Vice President of Student Experience.
Hi everyone, my name is Magdalene, but you can call me Maj, and I'm in my last semester of Public Health Sciences, and I'm running for Vice President of Student Experience. The reason why I'm running for Vice President of Student Experience is because all throughout my university life and university experience, I've been integrated into many social experience aspects. I've been a part of orientation at many levels, being a leader, a coordinator, and then O-team, as well as I was a Dawn for 1 year, and I was a part of many student services such as Raise and Mates, and many cultural clubs and foundational clubs as well. I believe that student decisions should be shaped by students, and so I believe that experience should be for every student, and I believe that my experience has a wide variety of factors and reasons on why student experience works and doesn't, and yeah.
Okay, Nix, I will ask you the same question. Give us just a quick statement about why you want to run for Vice President of Student Experience and your program and your year.
Yeah, so my name's Nix. I use they, them pronouns. I'm in my 3A term of honors biology here. And I think one of the main reasons that I want to run is WUSA was not very liked in my first year. So my starting year was 2023, and I'd heard a lot about kind of the inefficiencies of our student government and a lot of the problems that were going on with it. So I spent my first 3 years at the university getting involved in a lot of other things. So I'm a residence Dawn currently. I was in residence council my first year. I do a lot of things with debate. Fun fact, I'm actually the president of debate for all of Canada right now, working with that. And a lot of the work that I do ends up being advocacy focused, because this is something I've been passionate about since I was a kid. My mom got this started in me real early. I started attending protests at the age of 2 on rights and activism. So this is something I've been very passionate about and have done a lot through residence. I've been working with a lot of our upper staff right now in residence in reforms for Dawn training and in how we can get students feeling more engaged and creativity in program and a lot of things like this. And I think this is something that WUSA has been falling behind on a lot. I think students face a lot of issues on campus, whether that be with food services, accessibility, campus housing, etc. And because this was previously under the president role and they were kind of too busy to get a lot of this work done, that's fallen behind. And I want to get in and actually try to make some changes in these departments. I want us to bring action and to actually solve a lot of the issues that students are experiencing right now that detract from their ability to actually have a wonderful experience here, to get to enjoy all of the things that we have to participate in for student life and etc.
And Nix, you just kind of touched on this. The role you're running for is new this year, previously called Vice President. In your own words, what does your specific role actually entail?
Yeah, I think a large portion of the student experience role is advocacy on issues that students have regarding their experience outside of academics. So I think the important part with this role being new is that this is going to be a role, and whoever fulfills this, the work that they do over the next year is going to set a precedent for what this role actually will be able to do in future years coming. So I think one of these main things is actually being able to take the issues that we hear about from students, take this data we currently have about the things that students want to see on campus, and turning that into actionable items and doing it. I think that is something that we've been lacking in these main years, is the actual action being taken. So whether that be me knocking on the doors of food services every day, having conversations with them about what are students facing, how can we fix that, how can we ensure that people with dietary restrictions actually get accommodated. I think a large portion of this is going to be taking action to affect the things that students care about, the things that they are facing, to solve it so they can focus on the rest of their experience on campus.
Thank you. And Maj, I want to ask you the same question. The role you're running for is new this year, previously called the Vice President. In your own words, what does your specific role actually entail?
Yeah, so Vice President of Student Experience leads to advocacy for all undergraduate students that shapes any concern or decision outside of the classroom or outside of academics that entails with any student service or any concerns such as food services, accessibility services, SLC concerns, turnkey desk, etc. Within the role, I believe that whoever possesses the role gets to shape what the role can be and what happens through advocacy. What I've realized the past 3 years that I've been in university is that government has been stable here with the same things going on over and over again. And so majority of the time when we collect data, it's from RSP surveys as well as long-term surveys that the university and WUSA does as well. And so I think integrating different ideas and factors into what advocacy can essentially be is what the role entails within student feedback and what students believe are the right decisions for them.
Magdalene, this question is for you again. Can you explain in your own words how WUSA functions and how the organization advocates for students? And what would you want to change or keep in place should you be elected?
Okay. So WUSA is its own organizational entity apart from the University of Waterloo, and it's run by consists of 13 board of directors, 3 officer positions, vice president, vice president, government stakeholder relations, and vice president of student experience, as well as 10 board of directors, 1 from each faculty, as well as who gets voted in. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, no problem. So, can you explain in your own words how WUSA functions and how it advocates for students, and what would you want to change or keep in place should you be elected?
Other than the board, WUSA does have staff, full-time staff that leads the decision. Students lead the decision-making process while staff help and output that the decisions that are made. One thing about WUSA right now that I would like to change is the transparency of what happens in meetings and what decisions are being made from meetings. Majority of all meetings, we get meeting notes which have to be navigated through our WUSA website, and we get those 60-second videos on Instagram with informational decisions and what has been made. And right now, I believe that students don't really have the time, as well as don't really have, I guess, some sort of effort to look into what's going on with WUSA and what decisions have been made for advocacy, in a sense. And so one of the ideas that I've been kind of going around in my head is a Q board, which is a 3-column board of rotating what student decision factors are being made, as well as what the status of that decision is, and so that students have that transparency and visibility of seeing what decisions are being made, how the decisions are being made, and what the progress and status of those decisions are. If we put that cue board in visible places that students will see, such as TVs or electronic platforms that students walk by, such as hallways or even in front of the WUSA office, it'll be right there visible as a cue, so students will be able to look at what decisions have been made without having to do the extra work to look for where, how, and why.
And next, we're going to ask you the same question. Can you explain in your own words how WUSA functions and how the organization advocates for students? And should you be elected, what would you like to keep in place or change?
Yeah, I think I can expand a little bit upon what Maj has already said, but for the functioning of it, we do have the student portion, and then we also have the actual staff portion of it. So the students do comprise of this actual board of governors, which is this higher level kind of directive changes, whereas we have our actual hired staff who kind of do those day-to-day things, who are the ones actually running and throwing the events, kind of setting up those food, and doing more of that day-to-day hands-on stuff. But the other part about WUSA is we interact a lot with a lot of the different aspects of the university. So many members of the board and officers sit on basically a million different councils within the university, on different issues, so talking to the Board of Governors upon things, with undergraduate councils. There's a lot of different aspects, which is where we get that integration, and I think where a lot of that advocacy work can be done and come through. Students sit on a lot of these councils, and I think one of the things that I want to change is that there is a lot of talk that goes on, but I think we get kind of bogged down in the actual actions and taking that. I think the way that you get real change and advocacy has to come through consistent actions and persistency in following through once you have that kind of idea or that thing that you want to do, that issue you've identified that needs to make change. So one of the things that I want to do within the role is to be that person. When I do things, I don't kind of come up with an idea, come up with a project, and like leave it halfway. I will send that daily message to people. I am always looking at the things, the projects that I'm doing, whether that be within debate, residence, or what else I participate in, and I go, oh, it's been, I think, 3 days since this person has looked at this message. I'm gonna send them a reminder to get that thing done. So that's one thing that I really wanna bring to the role, is with the ideas that we have, with the change that Horizon and I think the rest of the student body wants to make, being able to actually act on that, talking to the relevant department, talking to food services, the people I know in campus housing, and being persistent in following up once those changes are being made and enacting in that, to really grease those wheels and kind of get that ball rolling. Because I think part of where we get bogged down is that there is a lot of talk and there are a lot of different kind of moving parts, and you really need somebody who's focused on the actual projects and who's dedicated to moving them forwards as quickly as possible.
Thank you. And I know both of you kind of touched on this already, but Nix, this question is for you. Many students don't actually know about WUSA and their role in general on campus, especially incoming first years. So what are some actionable steps you'll take to push exposure and an actual conscious understanding of WUSA?
Yeah, actually, I think I've had real direct experience with this. I've spent quite a few hours kind of talking to students over the past few days, and I think most of them, the first question they ask me is, what is WUSA? What does WUSA do? I think because of just the nature of kind of the way that we've been going about education for WUSA currently, a lot of what students see is only that kind of forward-facing, WUSA hosts this event, and maybe they do things beyond that, but I don't really know what. So this is something that I think it has been a real problem, and is probably one of the things that I think also leads to people not actually wanting to get involved and go for these higher up leadership roles like director and officer positions. So something that I want to do is trying to look at ways that we can on the ground actually be educating students, because I think we do have communications, we have our Instagram, we have our board, but a lot of students kind of get bogged down by that. We're seeing things all the time scrolling through our feeds. I think there's a lot of kind of information overload that happens on these online websites. So maybe this looks like me setting up a booth with a table saying, AMA, come walk up to me and actually have a conversation with me. So I think a lot of education comes to those kind of on the ground interactions with people where they can then spread that through word of mouth. So I want to do a lot more actually engaging with students and trying to kind of get our messaging out that way. And of course, also looking at maybe some more kind of reels or putting it up on the posters and things like that. But I think one of the main ways is just really having those actual connections and genuine conversations with students to help answer any questions that they do have and give them a bit more of a broader scope of the role of WUSA and what we can do for them.
That's great, thank you. And same question for Maj. Many students don't know about WUSA and what their actual role on campus is. What are some actionable steps you'll take to push exposure and conscious understanding? Like you previously mentioned, you'll have a decision board. How do you ensure that students don't just brush past it and actually understand what's on it?
Oh. So I'm going to touch upon a couple of things. Right now, as Nick said previously, that majority of students don't know what WUSA is. These past couple of weeks of just talking to students and having a booth and just being at talk about your candidates as well. Majority of students don't know how WUSA works, what WUSA does realistically. And what I've realized all throughout university and through talking to peers and just different people from different faculties is that Waterloo has a very academic focused stereotype. And what's a better way than to leverage that academic stereotype than to input resources that will have ways to say, this is WUSA, this is what we do, and essentially, this is WUSA, this is what we do, and learn more about us. I would hope to integrate those into academic settings. In first weeks of terms and first weeks of classes, they talk about syllabus courses, and majority of students do look over syllabuses. And so integrating a WUSA portion into a syllabus would be beneficial to the demographic that Waterloo presents, as well as having different events and activities that will gravitate towards what students at Waterloo really want to do. And with that, just like yesterday, the talk about our candidates' event, if a little flyer with information about what's happening right now with elections, how does elections really work, why does WUSA run elections, essentially, would be beneficial, as well as having those stamp cards that you need to sign from officer candidates. Majority of the time, students do, once they have a University of Waterloo concern, they do turn to WUSA essentially, and when they don't know what WUSA is or how WUSA can help them, there is this gray area of students not knowing what to do and being in a tough position.
So we're going to ask you guys to kind of elaborate on your answers here. Obviously, awareness is one thing, that's very important. But how do you guys plan on getting students to actually be involved in the changes that you're proposing? Starting with you, Magdalene.
Yeah. Can you ask the question again?
So obviously, awareness is one thing. It's important to raise awareness, but how do you guys plan on getting students to actually be on board with the ideas that you guys are proposing?
Yeah, so from the research that I've done for the past couple of weeks is that majority of all WUSA events that are really big hits are food events, of course, as well as community-based events. Recently, we had a family night dinner event, and a lot of students did appreciate that event because it brought community into, they brought their home community into their school and academic community. And so I believe that when making events, integrating events, or hosting events as WUSA, we should tailor to what our audience wants and what our audience expects. I asked a couple students over the past couple of weeks, what kind of events do you want to see? And majority of students just said anything that is within a time constraint that I can come to. Majority of all events, or some events that students can't come to because they're commuters, or they don't live on campus, or they live towards the satellite campuses, they just don't have the time, one, to commute to SLC or wherever the event is being hosted, and they just either don't want to come, or I don't know what the issue could be. But I think the biggest thing for events is to make them accessible for everybody, time-wise, food-wise, what the event can be, such as low barrier, high barrier events, depending on what it is. One goal that I have and want to integrate is bi-weekly or monthly stable events and calendar for all of undergraduate students. And that means for commuters, upper years, satellite campuses, university colleges. Majority of the time, university colleges do their own thing, but they are part of the Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association. And so having a set calendar of bi-weekly or monthly events, either low barrier or high barrier, has the chance for many students to plan ahead, whether that would be transportation-wise or grabbing your friends and coming to an event.
So next, we're going to ask you the same question. You guys, obviously awareness is huge, but kind of elaborate on how you plan to actually get students to care and interact with the ideas that you're proposing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I had a problem with in first year is students are not going to come with WUSA with issues if they don't think that WUSA is ever going to do anything about it. I think apathy within student government is a large problem that we've been facing over the few years and that I had in my first year. I think we see this, that when a student is being asked like, hey, what is it that you're struggling with on campus? And then they continue to struggle with that thing years and years later, because even if potentially changes are happening on the kind of back end of things, but it's happening slowly, when they don't know about it, all they see is that this is never getting any better, which means they're not going to want to come. They're not going to want to kind of engage any further in the steps that it actually takes to implementing solutions. So some things that I want to do are trying to actually get things, like trying to actually get as much done as I can, trying to make actionable change within the next year, but also information on what is happening on those changes. So more frequent updates on, okay, food services and like affordability on campus. What is currently happening? What are the roadblocks that we are facing to actually solving the issues that you're seeing? And just more education around that. Because I think a lot of the changes that students see and a lot of the issues that we face are things that you can't get done in a 6-month period or a 12-month period. They're kind of large, broad issues that are overarching. And so I want to do a lot more education on kind of what are the tangible steps that are being done and what has happened. Because I've had conversations with students over the past few days where they've been like, oh, like, we don't really have a lot of like third spaces on campus. Like, I'm not really seeing a lot of things. And when I was able to talk to them and be like, well, here are some of the new things that have actually just opened. We just had the Bomber reopening. We've opened more study spaces on the kind of upper floors of SLC. There were things that I was telling them about that had already been implemented that they weren't aware of. So these issues that they're facing aren't necessarily always still an issue, but they have a perception that it is. And they have a perception that things aren't being done. So not only taking more action, but updating students on the actions that are being taken so that they can feel that they're being heard, they can feel that they're being understood, and thus continue to come and continue to actually advocate for themselves to WUSA against issues that they face.
Thank you. So you guys are definitely bringing up a lot of issues that students are facing. But Nix, I want to ask you, what do you think are the biggest issues in this campaign?
Yeah, I think Horizon's platform outlines quite a few of these. I think one of the main things that we talk about is food insecurity and affordability on campus, because this is such a proximate issue to students' lives. You're going to struggle to kind of engage with your classes, engage with student life when you don't know whether you're going to be able to like afford your dinner that night. I think some of the steps that we've taken and some of the steps we want to continue to take is doing things like securing long-term funding for the Pay What You Can program. It's currently a pilot project right now. We want to not only fund that, but I also want to look at areas for expansion for how can we continue to create this? What are other measures in which we can do to tackle issues like this? What like kind of advocacy can I do towards food services? I think especially one thing with food services is their dietary restrictions. I'm a Donnan resident, and I know of students who've had to move out of residence because they're gluten-free and our kitchens have too much cross-contamination for them to actually be able to eat food and kind of have dinner. And I think issues like these, what we know about, are unacceptable. And so I think being actually able to tackle these issues that students are facing, to tackle affordability, to tackle their dietary restrictions. I had a trans student who was talking to me about when we submit our pronouns in Quest, that information never gets sent to professors. So every year when they have classes, they have to talk to each professor. They get misgendered at first. They have to have that awkward conversation. I think there are issues like this that I see, especially things like the pronouns, that can be fixed, I think, quite easily, and that we need to just step in and actually do.
Thank you, Nix. And Maj, I want to ask you the same question. What do you think are the biggest challenges, biggest issues in this campaign?
With student experience taken into account, I believe that one of the biggest issues is providing that student experience under a system that is under pressure of deficit constraints. The university right now, or WUSA right now, they have, the way they get their money is from undergrad students who pay a certain fee from whatever the fee is, but essentially, I think that we don't have an increased social perspective. Many things right now in WUSA are very formal and very set into platform, and because the officer positions are only for a short period of time, leveraging your assets or leveraging resources around you would be the next step onto how we can bring, I guess, awareness, student experience into WUSA spaces. One idea I have is to integrate local community partnerships onto campus as well, and it would have mutual benefits for both on-campus and off-campus students, as well as the local partnerships that we would be partnering with if so. And so there's visibility throughout partnerships and as well as benefits. As Nix mentioned before, the Pay What You Can program is in pilot, and the Pay What You Can program right now runs at a certain time with a certain amount of resources per day with that constraint. For example, a Better Tent City in Kitchener, it is basically like small little homes for the homeless in Kitchener, and they have an influx of food coming in, and it's run by a Catholic school board. And so majority of all their food, if they can't be used within the day or within the week, they end up throwing it out if it's not perishable. And so having that donation, for example, would have that fix or cost of pay what you can programs. And so I believe that leveraging assets within the university and outside of the university will help benefit what the biggest problem we have at the university right now, which is a deficit of funds.
So Magdalene, this one's for you. You just mentioned the deficit of funds. How would you work to maintain or create maintain existing services or create new services? And this is especially in regards to allocating funds to clubs, to upcoming and existing clubs, in order to perform their functions. How do you kind of plan on maintaining or creating these new services?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
So you mentioned like there's currently a budget deficit. Kind of how do you plan on either maintaining existing services or creating new ones, especially in regards to student clubs? Like I think Rory mentioned he plans on giving them $200 to each club. Kind of how do you plan on like managing like this these services if you're to be elected?
Yeah. So University of Waterloo being in a deficit doesn't mean that WUSA is in a deficit. And since WUSA operates on student fees and all those student fees get dispersed into different resources. Sorry, I still don't really understand the question.
So how would you work to maintain services amid the university budget cuts?
Okay. For many of the services right now, for budget cuts as well as maintaining events for things that require financial pay or our finances, a lot of the time student-run services, they could collaborate with many different other clubs or other services to gain that financial perspective or to gain that financial aspect in maintaining a club or functioning with the club. As I said before, since we can't, I guess, give them an influx amount of money to run a certain event, there are many different initiatives on campus to get that money, such as SLEF, for example, which is a student life endowment fund, where clubs and student societies can go and pitch a presentation for an event or anything that they want to get funding for to promote that event and to essentially execute that event. And so there are many other ways to get funding other than adding funding to a club directory for the amount of money that they get. And yeah.
Thank you, Madge. Same question for you, Nix. How would you work to maintain services amid the university budget cuts?
Yeah, I think one of the main things is a lot of people think when you have like a new service or an existing service that like there's kind of only one way to do things, so that they always need to cost more money. I think the way in which you're able to get around this is by having a lot of creativity in the ways that you actually implement the services or implement innovations to your services. So for example, with food services, Mudge, one of my good friends and fellow Don, who's also running on Team Horizon, was facing this issue with the food support service and kind of the community like donations that they had, where they had a lack of community donations coming in for our I'm forgetting the word for it right now, but for the food services that they give out, and so the donations that they actually receive. So one of the things that he did to kind of encourage people to give more donations without requiring extra resources was he started this initiative where he challenged faculties to kind of put them head to head in getting donations, which led to, I believe it was over 9,000 extra units being donated because of this. So I think a lot of the things here just require you to have new people in and to come up with innovative and creative ways to do things. So especially with clubs, maybe this looks like trying to innovate some of the ways in which we do our club forum process, which is currently happening. Like I have been involved with a lot of clubs on campus, Smile, UW Debate, Waterloo Forum, etc., and have found myself like the club system to be very frustrating. So some of the things that they've been doing, the innovations that they've taken that I'd like to continue, are things like looking at the event forms coming in and actually triaging that. So they're looking at things like this that don't actually require additional resources, but are ways in which we can kind of streamline and use efficiency in the current processes we have to free up kind of areas, to free up resources and certain things like that. So really just taking kind of a new fresh perspective and looking at things like that. I also have experiences with this both within my Dawn role and within my role with like UW debate and the tournaments that I run, is like, being a Dawn, you have to run sometimes like 12 programs within 3 months, and I have $240. Like I have $5 per head of my students. So it requires a lot of that creative thinking in how can I maximize the programs that I'm providing for my students while spending as little amount of money as possible. So often that requires like working with other Dawns. It requires like being creative in where I'm spending my money, where I'm purchasing from, and just paying attention to a lot of the little details like that. So I'd love to bring kind of some of that fresh perspective to the role and look at what are we currently doing, what are ways that we can kind of optimize this, what are new and creative things that we can bring in, whether that be talking to other student unions. I have a lot of friends back home in Nova Scotia who are involved in their student governments. So talking to them, seeing, okay, what is it that you guys do? How are you able to kind of free up a few extra dollars or free up some time for the people that you actually have working on these, and bringing some of those back to our own student union.
Okay, yeah. So moving forward, kind of like obviously we're in the election season right now. This is for you, Nix. Kind of tell me, what are some of the biggest challenges that you anticipate facing if you're elected?
Yeah, I think some of the main things are just really how slow a lot of the things move and a lot of the wheels move when you want to get change. I have a lot of big ideas, I have a lot of things I want to do, and I understand that a lot of this I'm not actually going to be able to accomplish, or I'm not going to be able to kind of see the effects of. But I think that the biggest thing is just going to be working with people. So it's going to be establishing a lot of these working relationships and really identifying what are the roadblocks to the solutions I want to implement, to the changes we want to make, and how can we work around that. So it's going to be a lot of time kind of talking to people and really being creative in how I'm approaching these situations, understanding what the root causes are of things that are kind of causing blockages, and then being able to work with the team around me to, within the limited time that I have, make as much progress towards fixing those and getting past those roadblocks as I can.
So this one's for you as well, Maj. Kind of tell me, what are some of the biggest challenges you anticipate facing if you're elected?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges I will have or anticipate having would be sorry, I gotta think on this for a minute. One of the biggest challenges I feel that I will be going to anticipate, or hopefully anticipate, is the willingness to be present for every student. Having this role, or possessing the role of Vice President Student Experience, is being the advocate for 36,000 students in Waterloo. And it doesn't just mean at our campus, main campus, University of Waterloo. I mean the satellite campuses, as well as university colleges and commuters, students who live or who don't live in residence and outside of residence. One of the things that I've noticed or have heard from the past couple of weeks is that the further that students live away from campus, the less of a chance that they'll come to an event and be integrated into the social life of Waterloo. And so I believe that when facing challenges like these, you have to integrate yourself into that community and know what that community wants and work within that community. Majority of all WUSA programs and events are held in SLC, but they could be held somewhere else around campus where it could be more accessible for students to reach, or at a different satellite campus or within the community. Many events could be placed around the community for students who don't live on campus, first-year students, sorry, not first-year students, but all first-year students or majority of first-year students who live on campus first year know what's going on, what's happening with WUSA. So I feel like majority of the time, the traction and impact comes from first and second year students, or who live close to the campus of Waterloo, or our main campus. And so, yeah.
Thank you, Maj. And I'm going to continue on asking you the question. WUSA has had issues with public image, with things like inefficiency, distrust, especially maybe even with clubs or just general students. What do you plan on doing to change that image?
Yeah. I think to change the image of WUSA or to change a perspective that a lot of students have within WUSA is to kind of explain, identify, and always being there. By always being there, always communicating with students, having that information or being that one point of person of information before going to the board to make decisions or direct into decisions. Students having that knowledge, knowledge is power essentially, but students having that knowledge, knowing what is happening, what's going on, means also having those resources that are always there. And one of the biggest resources that I believe Waterloo can leverage is the board, is the government that we hold right now. I would like to see more government in student clubs and student societies that they hold and face, or any club sanctioned run event. Get to know a little bit more about your board, get to know what they're all about, what they're doing now, things that they can help with in the future. Or not being at an event or not being integrated into your community, although you are working for that community essentially, would probably be the biggest barrier into students not knowing what WUSA is, students not knowing how WUSA works.
Thank you, Madge. And Nick, same question for you. WUSA has had issues with public image, inefficiency, distrust, etc. What do you plan on doing to change that?
Yeah, I think I was one of these students in my first year who experienced this, where all that I was hearing was complaints about WUSA. I don't think I went my full first year without hearing a good thing said. The thing that was able to change my perspective on WUSA was by actually talking with people and seeing the actions that have been taken. It was hearing and talking to like Rory and Aria during our dawn training and hearing about the government reforms that were being pushed and currently and already had been implemented. It was real action about the actions that have been taken and the actions that are currently being taken. So as I kind of mentioned in some of my previous responses, one of our big pushes as Horizon is the things that you need to do are actually getting things done. You need to take action, you need to make change, and you need to educate people while you are doing that. So whether that be me as a person, if you send me a message, if you send me an email going, hey, I'm having this issue, or I'm experiencing this thing, what's going on with WUSA, I will respond to that. I want to be present for students on campus. I want to be a resource that they can do, that they can actually come to and use. I want to be accessible, because a lot of the kind of ways in which I've gotten involved has been through those conversations, not necessarily through seeing that reel, but through actually talking to somebody, through talking and having a conversation. So I want to be somebody like that for people, but I also think we just broadly need to do more education. We need to do more updates on what are currently being worked on. Maybe that looks like a monthly update newsletter that WUSA can send about, hey, here's some of the things that we've been doing in kind of a more accessible form for people. But I really think it just is both making changes and education on those changes so students can see that like we are wanting to change, we do want to represent you, we're not doing anything out of malice, we don't want to have you facing these issues, and that you are the people that we work for, you are who we serve, and will continue to do so, and really making sure that students actually feel like they are being supported by our association.
Yeah, for sure. So we're gonna move on from that. Nick, this question is for you. So your party has mentioned like wanting to host things like bigger events such as concerts in the future. Where would you find the funding for that? And do you find that like it's appropriate to like give funding to something so extracurricular while there are still issues like unpaved walkways, study spaces, etc., that would probably have a more immediate impact on student lives if those were addressed?
Yeah, I'm gonna get real niche here with the concert thing because this is something that I'm super passionate about. But I have a niche interest in like Canadian artists who were popular in the 2010s that people know, artists like Scott Hellman, Marianas Trench, names like these, who aren't as kind of big names. So there are a lot of artists, I had literally just a list of artists for things like the concert who aren't kind of these bigger names like Kendrick, who might cost them a lot of dollars, but people who are more approachable and accessible for WUSA to actually be able to bring this. But I think in regards to like a balance of having these kind of large scale fun things and the actual day-to-day basics, I think although it is really important that we do have things like our paved walkways and we do things like taking care of our maintenance, etc., I think we can't just focus on the basics because student life should be more than that also. You do still need to have these kind of fun aspects for students to be able to look out to, because that is what really makes, I think, part of the university experience is to have those fun things. It's to be able to maybe pay $5 to go to a concert on campus. These are experiences and the things that will actually make an impact and last in students' lives beyond their experience on university. It is the fun things that we remember and are able to like kind of carry through carry through with that. So I think also another thing I want to do is have smaller scale events that aren't as much money for WUSA to be running. Seeing things like trivia nights or karaoke nights in the Bomber that run weekly. I think it's consistency in the actions that we have and kind of being intentional with the events and programs that we run to have the biggest impact on students, while being able to, of course, also take care of their basic needs.
And Maj, what are your thoughts on that, given that you would, if you were to be elected, it would be your responsibility to run these kinds of events? Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, so I was told previously that Vice President Student Experience doesn't get to decide whether or not a concert or an event can be held, but they do have the authority to give feedback and put input on what could be done. One of the busiest weeks every year is Welcome Week in September, and that would probably be the best week to leverage that asset of a concert if possible. As Nick said before, Canadian artists, local Canadian artists as well, and if we were to host a concert or be able to host a concert, maybe crazy idea, but we can open it up to the community, open it up to Laurier, open it up to the outside community, charge a certain amount, cover the cost of the artist, while also gain a little bit of more financial advantage for other social events. If that concert is a hit, then concerts can happen every year, and our school can be a part of that social aspect process of how majority of other universities in Ontario have a concert and an artist rep their school essentially. But I believe that when creating a concert, or if a concert is in talks, then leveraging the community, leveraging your assets around you to gain more assets and different financial perspectives could lead to more social events, more low and high barrier events, and more community events for all students, no matter where they are physically.
Okay, yeah, thank you for your answers. So we're now going to give you guys some time to give your closing statements. We'll start with you again, Magdalene. Kind of just like, in like a short, like 30-second burst, kind of just wrap up some of the things you said and why people should vote for you.
Yeah, so I believe that students deserve to be more than consulted and just talked to, essentially. The first step for this role is to have, or to be in a community, and yes, to talk to students, but undergraduates and students deserve to have that transparency, that awareness, that grasp to what really WUSA is and how could WUSA help you experience the best university social aspect that you can experience here. And so I believe that students deserve to be more heard, they deserve a voice, they deserve to belong, and they deserve to have fairness all throughout university life and university experiences. I want campus action to actually lead, I want campus feedback and student experience feedback to actually lead into action, and to do so, or to have that action done for students who are off campus or students who are upper years. I want them to be able to feel like they belong, no matter what year you're in, no matter what satellite or what campus you essentially go to, or if you're part of the university colleges. I believe that every student from the start of university should feel that they are in a community and want to be in that community for their whole undergrad. Like I've said before, Waterloo, I fear, has a little bit of an academic focused reputation, and majority of first year and second year students that I've talked to for the past weeks have said that this might be a little bit of an issue. They think that yes, academics are important, but they want their social aspect to be more inviting, more open. And so with that, with the experience that I have, with the many things that I've done all over campus, as well as the many new ideas that I have, I believe that I would be honored to be your next Vice President of Student Experience.
Nick, same thing. I'll give you a chance to give us like a quick burst recap of what you said, and just tell people why we should vote for you.
Yeah, I think people should vote for me and my fellow Horizon candidates because we really want to push actionable items and change. All of us have seen and been frustrated with the inaction that has come on behalf of WUSA and other parts of the university, and we want to actually do things. We want to use the time that we have. I am somebody who is a very results-driven person and is somebody who spends a lot of my time taking action. I don't like sitting in the areas where we talk and nothing ever gets done. I want to be that person who shows up every day, who works a 10-hour day to actually make change for the students. There are issues that I've faced, there are issues that my students have faced, and I've been able to do advocacy and solve some of these at a lower level, but I think it's time for me to bring it to this larger level, to bring it to the full Undergraduate Student Association, to bring some of these changes forward, and to actually solve the issues that students are facing on campus, or to at least do as much as I can within the next year. I think it's really important, especially given that this is the first time that this role has ever existed, to set a precedent of the person within this role, of Vice President Student Experience, being a force to be reckoned with, of the person within this role being somebody who is constantly out there, who is taking action, who is talking to the departments who are failing students on campus and getting them to actually see the impact that they have, realize why it is that they are not serving students properly, and change for the better to ultimately improve the experience that students have outside of their academic lives.
Thank you, Nix. Magdalene, did you want to ask a question?
Maybe so. Next, I have a question.
I'm just going to preface it by saying each of you will be given 1 minute and 30 seconds to ask your question or reply it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've heard many times that you've said that over the past couple of years that you've noticed that WUSA government really hasn't been creating change, but what I've realized is that in the past couple of years, WUSA has actually been run by the same platform or same team that you're currently running with. And so what's different or what's new from the past couple of years compared to now? Because if you're talking about the couple of years that I guess you didn't realize that government was at its top, but Horizon was in government, then how is it new? How is it different? How will you change that role of being able to make it different than how it was in the past years?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of the years of inactivity that I'm talking about were ones before Horizon actually was. It was the years before when I joined in 2023, where a lot of the members that I'm running with hadn't been in power. And I think the members that I'm running with have done things. They've done things like stopping the co-op fee increase from anything above inflation. They've done things like reopening the bomber. We've done things like getting the Pay What You Can pilot program running. I think there are a lot of things, and I wouldn't be running with the team that I am if I didn't think that there were things that they were actually doing, if I thought that they were just kind of those people who do a lot of talk and don't take a lot of action. I think the main thing that I want to change is a bit more education on that background piece. A lot of the projects in which the team that I'm running with have started have been things that have been kind of having some things going on. They've been having updates, but they're not at their completion yet. A lot of the things that we want to do are still ongoing. And so I think just more education about that fact, about the fact that we are working on it, we are working on changes, and being able to bring that is kind of the main difference that I want to bring to the team.
Thank you. And just to make things fair, Nix, would you like to ask Madge a question?
Ooh. Yeah, I think my biggest question is, what specifically with the roles that you have previously done are kind of skills that you think that you will bring to the current role, to Vice President, and actually like how will that help you accomplish the things that you want to get done?
Yeah, so majority of the roles that I've encompassed all throughout campus, I believe start from the beginning of university life to essentially to the end, while shaping that student experience. So for example, orientation. I was a part of orientation for 3 years as a leader, then as a coordinator, and then as O-team. I've gained those steps, those critical ways to get up there and to know different ways and different things to change. Over the 3 years, I've noticed that when you're a leader, you're more integrated in with the students. When you're a coordinator, you're more in the back, and when you're an O-team, you're kind of managing the whole event. So being a leader and being a coordinator helped me manage that whole event because I got to see what students liked, what students didn't like, what I needed to change, what I didn't need to change. And that goes with all the roles that I also previously have done. For example, I was a Don my second year. probably one of the best experiences I've had on campus. And so I could agree with some of the points that you made about donning and campus housing. But I've realized that being a Don, you're the main point of contact for first-year students. You're the main point of contact for any concern that they have, even if it's not academic, their social life and what they've done or what they're doing in their first year. And so having that guidance or being that upper year in perspective for them is kind of shaping already and giving them that advocacy essentially.
I'm so sorry, Madge, that is your time for the
Okay,
answer.
no worries.
And that is all the time that we do have for today. I want to thank all the candidates, Nix and Madge over here, Samir as well as Rory. And I want to remind everybody that voting days will take place from February 3rd to February 5th. And you can cast your vote online at vote.wusa.ca. Unofficial election results will be released the next day on February 6th. Thank you.